Be live, Steve. We have a thumbs up. All right, we just need to get Terry's attention. Oh, I'm staticky.
We're talking UV football.
I know, go Utes. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because it's 5 o'clock. And today is Tuesday, December 7th. 2021, we are going to start our last board meeting of the year. Let's indicate who's here, starting with Terry.
Terry Bodden.
Connie Burgess.
Nicole McDermott.
Somewhere over there.
Chris Wynn.
Clark Nelson.
You too.
Dave Garrett, Business Administrator.
Rich Nye, Superintendent.
And Karen Winder. Welcome to those joining us online and those in the room with us. We're going to begin tonight with our annual assessment report. Dr. Erin Wilson's going to lead us through that, showing us some of the impacts of COVID. So come on up.
She made me do it.
Dawn just talks and talks and talks.
Thank you, Board President. Yearly, there's a report to you from my department on our district level assessment results. During the 2019-20 school year, we did not have as many data points to report on because we're not able to complete many of the end-of-year assessments that we typically report. And then for this last year, the 2021 school year, we have more assessment for data for review. However, we're also reviewing some of the data that we'll see with some degree of caution due to the differing impacts of COVID on each student's experience during the last school year. Some other context, the Utah State Board of Education sought and received a federal accountability waiver in April of 21, allowing flexibility for the accountability requirements for last school year due to the ongoing effects of COVID-19. This week, the state office released school report cards that include some of the component pieces of school accountability that we're able to complete and which will provide some meaningful information. However, overall points or grades will not be calculated this year. And so the data that we'll review tonight includes high school graduation rates, college and career readiness, course completion, ACT results, student achievement in language arts, math and science, English learner progress, as well as some district benchmark data. Before viewing these data that I described, I'd like to highlight some of the purposes of assessment. The purpose of an assessment depends on the type of the assessment being taken, and as well as the timing and the audience of who primarily consumes these data. And as we look at this slide, the column on the left, we see assessment for learning. Here we're discussing formative assessments such as Acadience reading, Acadience math, or other benchmarks that assess learning as continued ways of measuring progress and promoting student growth. The classroom teachers and students are the ones who primarily grapple with these data shortly after these assessments are taken. And from these data, students, parents, and teachers can better respond to students' needs. And then on the right column of this slide, we see that we're reminded of the assessments for learning. So these include summative assessments that I described earlier. Not included in this matrix, but is in research literature regarding assessment, is the notion that assessment can and should be used for learning. Assessments not of or for learning, but as learning, assessments as learning. Meaning that assessments can be a great instructional tool that teachers employ in their classrooms, and students can learn from the process of taking assessments themselves. So these assessments can become valid learning tools if designed to promote self-reflection and self-monitoring of learning. So with that context, I'll now start by presenting assessment data of learning, namely summative assessments measured by the school accountability system. Recall that the school accountability system includes several component parts: proficiency, growth of the lowest 25%, English language learner progress at elementary and middle school level. And then we see it on the right circle for high schools. The school accountability system includes component pieces of high school graduation, ACT performance, and advanced coursework. Now for the school year that just ended, 2021, we have data to help us gauge proficiency and English language learner progress, as well as the high school requirements, but because of the testing gap year in 1920, we don't have growth indicators. indicators calculated using previous year's performance on year-end assessments. It's about moving, sorry.
Erin, can I just ask, so on that growth, both the green and the dark blue growth, that's growth on both the RISE or the ACT, or it could be a number of different, it's just
Yeah.
whatever test that grade is being tested on?
So for elementary and middle schools, it's based off of RISE. And then in the high school as well, I believe it's, based on available exams such as ACT.
Okay.
But we don't have that this year. We will in all future years because the data that I'll present is the new baseline moving forward for this coming spring. Great question. So starting with graduation rates, our district rate overall decreased from 76.1% in 2020 to 74.5% in 2021. As we look at each of the high schools displayed, most saw slight decreases, but notably a few increased, namely Cyprus, Kearns, Skyline, and then the YES program. An important note is the graduation rate reported on the state school report card is a delayed indicator, meaning that the 2020 graduation rate is reported on the 2021 report card. We explore the graduation rates in the next slide or two. Here we see graduation rates by group. This graph shows graduation rates by groups across the past 5 years in order to identify trends in these data. All students are displayed, so the district trend on that black line, and then economically disadvantaged students in dark blue, English language learners in yellow, students with disabilities in light blue. And then you'll note the values in the table below indicate the y-axis in the graph above. So from it, we see the graduation rate of economically disadvantaged students went down slightly, but the graduation rates of English language learners and our special education student population both went up.
Erin, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah,
Back on the previous slide, sorry, I was not quick enough.
you're good.
So I look at this and, we have a couple in the 70s, but we have a lot in the 80s and the 90s, but yet it seems, that Granite Connection High and the YES program that was driving our percentage lower back down into the 74, because if you took those two out, our average would be, not that we can take them out, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
Trying to get a
good question.
complete picture of really how our 8 network high schools are doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, some good context to speak to that is those two schools, the N size are quite small, and so they don't contribute in the overall population as much as other schools because it's still, our percentage isn't based on an average of each of our certified high schools. Our average is based on total student enrollment.
Okay.
So not to the extent that you might think looking at this alone.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, because I was like, wow, that's quite a difference in numbers.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I just want to understand that better.
Very good. And so similarly, we look at the construct of graduation by race. Here, the black line again represents all students in the district graduation rate or our district average, and the comparison and trends can be seen for various groups in the other colors. And so there's a lot on this slide, but generally we see that all others went down slightly except our Native American Indian student population went up. So if there's no questions, I'll move along to our other slides. So now we'll talk about ACT spring administration. The graph here displays the ACT performance of 11th graders. So all 11th graders take the ACT in the spring, and the scores on the ACT range from 1 to 36 with 18 or higher established as the target score used in school accountability. The percent displayed in this graph, what that means is the percent of students who scored 18, or the score of 18 or above in the spring administration that was given to all 11th graders. Recall that in 2020, this assessment did not occur, so that year is not displayed in these data. Also note that the percent included in the school report card, this is the percent included in the school report card for 2021. Okay, and then as we look,
I was just going to say, if a student does not show up to take the test, the ACT test, in the day that their school administers it, how is that student accounted for? How does that flow through the data?
Good question. And the nuance that might be better answered by my colleague Joan Bramble. What I feel fairly confident in answering is it doesn't count against a school if any student is missing. I'm fairly certain in that.
And this was the ACT given this spring, which means these are now seniors.
I believe so.
Is that right?
And there are makeup days. If they're not there on that day, they have some we try to get as many students as we can to take it. And so we do have some follow-up days that they are administered. But to Dr. Wilson's point, we're not penalized in any way other than we are shooting for a 95%, at least a 95% participation rate on all our assessments.
Yeah, very good. As we look at the ACT data, considering the composite score, so on the cluster of graphs on the far left, that shows the previous graph, but throughout time on how our composite score has gone up as a district. And we also see that the composite scores in other areas as well, of English, reading, math, and science. So while it's true that our district composite score went up overall, and as it went up in most subcategories, we see that it went down in mathematics. And we also note on the bottom left that the N size of students did go down. To your question, Board Member Nelson, that we are very interested in the number of students that test, and we saw lower participation during the pandemic.
It should be noted too, as we're looking at these data, the participation rates were lower. The state board in their analysis has found that the decrease in participation rates was largely those who hadn't performed well previous or were at other at-risk factors. So something to keep in mind as we're looking at the data, while the participation rates went down, the numbers of students who were taking them or didn't take them this year as compared to 2019 were typically students that hadn't performed well on previous administrations or other assessments. So as we're looking through this lens at this data, just recognize that chances are bringing this in, and the State Board of Education did partner third party with the statistics group anyway to be able to identify some of that measurable impact. In other words, some of the numbers we're seeing should actually be a little bit lower because of who didn't take the test.
Right. Yeah, with the N size smaller and then the self-selecting, it was those students who likely wouldn't have performed as well had they entered into that pool of test takers. Very good. So now we explore advanced course taking by groups. So these graphs provide additional data on the trends of advanced course taking by different student populations. And in essence, it shows that all measured student groups are taking coursework. There's an increase in number taking rigorous coursework, and that those numbers have increased each year. We see a visual of this here. And so this is a point of celebration that, credit to our students, the parents, the administration, and district support here. We're encouraging our students to take more rigorous coursework, and we see that trend go up throughout time and according to various student demographics. I think that's a good point to celebrate.
Sorry. Maybe this will be answered with our discussion that happens later, but the number of students taking at least one IB course, I thought they all, if they were in the IB program, they had to take all of the IB courses. Am I misunderstanding that?
Well, let me, so what this is measuring, and I think I'll say that and then it might address your question. So the advanced course taking indicator reflects the total percent of students who earn a C or better in an AP course, IB course, or concurrent enrollment. And so this is the total number of students who are taking at least one of these courses in each graduating cohort year. And so based off of that, tell me your question one more time.
It says number of students taking at least one IB course. I thought the IB program, they had to take all of the IB courses. So is that for us to understand that 276 are enrolled in the IB program?
So I have not worked as an administrator in a school with IB, but I believe your understanding is correct. And in that case, that the number of students would just be showing up the one time, but I'd need to do some homework and verify that with you.
I'll speak to that. So in the IB program, you can take just IB classes individually. If you want an IB diploma, you have to do the full program, but you can still take just individual classes.
Okay.
Very good.
Thanks.
Okay, now we'll discuss Utah Aspire Plus. This assessment is taken by all 9th and 10th graders and provides proficiency data on the school accountability indicator at the high school level. This assessment was given for the first time in 2019. It was not given in 2020 and then given again in 2021. This assessment is an end-of-year assessment rather than end of course. So a nuance there is that, for example, in science, the assessment may not necessarily align to all of the core taught in a science course, because depending on the science courses high school student takes, they're taught different standards. And this assessment also provides students and schools with a predictive ACT score. So we only have the 2 years here. We see some decreases in 9th grade compared to the 2019 data, but some increases in 10th. Like Dr. Knight alluded to, we need to be cautious in our interpretation of these data because participation rates were lower in 2021 than they were in 2019. We don't necessarily have the same demographic of students who took the test in both years to compare them against each other. So next we'll move on to our ELA assessments in 2019 and 21 for grades 3 through 10. The purple bars represent Granite's performance, with the darker color for 2019, the lighter color for 2021, and then the solid black dot hovering above represents the state level performance in that grade level as a comparative metric. So here we see decreases at each grade level from the performance in 2019, with the exception of 10th grade. And we want to again be cautious in comparing these data, as we had smaller participation rates in 2021 than we had in 2019. So I'll pause here. I know there's a lot on this data before we move to mathematics. Okay. Now as we look at the same type of, or the same way to display this data, this chart displays the proficiency for mathematics in each grade level for both 2019 and 2021. The bars represent Granite's district performance in each grade level, and then again the comparative state black dot above. So overall, we should note that mathematics has not been as strong in language arts, and we saw greater decreases in math when comparing 2019 to 2021, likely because the sequential nature of mathematics that's hard to maintain traction when there's disruption such as a pandemic. And then last, we see science performance across all grade levels. It's some interesting context to note. 4th and 5th grade had a change in their standards in 2021 that might account for some of the achievement in those grade levels. So that's science. We'll move next to English language learner progress. So here we see the percent of English language learners who met their progress goal for the past 4 years, as well as comparison to the state. This progress is measured based on the performance on the WIDA Access Assessment. Each student that is identified as an English language learner takes the WIDA Access exam and has an individual target based on several factors, including their initial proficiency level in English and the number of years they've been learning English. And so their growth target is determined by a metric or a matrix. Those are the two input, and then they have a growth target. We see that there's a notable decrease between 2020 and 2021, likely speaking to the effect of the pandemic on this group, and their likely exposure to English outside of the home. So those are all of the summative data, or the assessment of learning. And here we begin a part of the presentation where we look at more types of formative assessment. Here what we've done is we've compared proficiency levels by Acadience reading, and we have kindergarten on the left and then 1st grade on the right. We'll note that our numbers of students in kindergarten dropped significantly for the 2020-21 year. And looking at this cohort, it seemed that we gained back some students, but it's interesting to note that the enrollment varied more widely here than other grade levels.
So Erin, what we're looking at here is the 2020-21
Yes, so this
class
correct.
of kindergartners and of 1st graders. It's not like it's the same group in kindergarten and then 1st grade.
Different, correct. Now, let's look at in this bottom left graph. So these are all the kindergartners in 2018 and 19, and what percentage of them, this entire bar adding up to 100%. This percentage here, roughly 39%, were red, and then, or well below benchmark, and then below, at, and above. So I particularly, when I look at these graphs, I see if the red is shrinking or expanding and the blue is shrinking or expanding. I tend to note those. And so we're interested as we look across time, how did our kindergartners start the school year on Acadian's beginning of year assessment? And we see that compared to 2021 and then this school year, it was about the same. And then we can look at the, similarly, we can look at variance in the first grade, how the first graders starting the school year with Acadian's reading, there were less, well below benchmark, but again, we consider N size and we see that there were approximately 300 less students in the district that took this beginning of year reading assessment in that grade level.
Now, on that, what jumps out to me on that first grade chart is that second line down. Look how big that red is.
Right.
Is it safe to assume that COVID, I mean, with young readers, because that year is 2021 on the heels of having a very disrupted kindergarten year.
Correct,
where
yes.
you're learning all of those fundamentals, sight words.
Yes.
And obviously that continues into first grade. So is it safe to say that's just a very notable COVID impact?
Yes. Research has indicated that COVID affected literacy among that K-3 band more than others because they haven't developed those strong literacy foundation skills. And in response to that, our district has implemented letters training for those lower grade teachers to make up this gap quickly because it'll be harder the older the children get.
What's happening with the fourth graders? Because they're the ones that, I mean, they're, to me, I see their impact the most because they had that, you know, third grade was just the disruption, but then that's changing over to fourth grade is the not learning to read anymore, and some of those teachers are having a struggle. So what is being implemented there?
We're finding that many of the schools are using the same letters training for lower grade to the upper grade teachers because it's excellent content, and if you're below benchmark, then the same strategies will apply. I wonder should we go to that slide and look at the fourth grade, and then we'll.
Before we do, can I comment on this?
Yeah.
So I'm seeing that in 2021, I think that number is we had 3,700 kindergartners, but then in first grade, those same kindergartners in 21, 22, we had 4,000 something. I can't see that number.
Right.
So
yeah.
we're assuming there was a whole bunch of kids who didn't come, which we kind of knew.
Or didn't test. So this isn't enrollment. This is the number that tested.
Okay.
And you're right to read it in that way. So that this cohort right here with the 3,795, we had that many tests as kindergartners. Then the following year, this year's cohort as first graders, we had an increase of about 300 additional in that cohort test, both due to enrollment and then increased participation in that assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Did they test them, anybody that was an online learner? How did they do those assessments?
That's an excellent question. Last year, when there were both modalities, that proved a challenge. My understanding is that, or Rick, would you care to speak to that?
They tried to get them to come in.
Yeah.
So they try and schedule an appointment just for a specific time to come in and take the assessment.
So that could be reflective, though, of they just didn't also get them in. Because we know that our kindergarten enrollment was low anyway, but that could be that.
Both factors. And that approach is also true of the RISE exam. We saw lower rates even though the school tried as best as they could to have those parents and students come in.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, excellent questions. We see the same data displayed for now grades 2 and 3. We see more consistency among the third graders here on the right, but we see also the participation rates going down slightly, likely due to the difficulty in testing that we've just discussed. And then to your question, Board Member McDermott, we see fourth graders here on the left, and we see that there's a slight increase in the reds, but we also see a slight increase in these above benchmarks. But the concern, again, always is there's a lower N size, about 200 less in the district, and we assume those would increase the well below benchmark more. And then as we go on this next and last slide, we felt it was appropriate to not include sixth grade as a district summary because that would kind of throw off the distribution. When a sixth grader is in an elementary school, they take Acadians, but when a sixth grader is in a junior high school, they take the growth measure. It used to be reading inventory. And so it was probably most appropriate to provide a K-5 summary on the left, and then to separately house the data for sixth grade, because it's a smaller sample. And so that, I believe, concludes my presentation, and I'm very happy to answer questions or have further discussion.
I think we kind of asked questions as we went along, but is there somebody who had a question or a comment? Julie?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, so we got these scores. What are we doing with them?
So what, I love that you asked that question, because my department is uniquely positioned to support schools in that. We provide schools data, but then a planning template to look at their funding sources holistically, including each school's ESSER allocation, and its purpose is to close the learning gap of students. And so the support and accountability metrics behind that is saying, school, here are your data. What goals are you going to set to address learning loss? And how are you going to use, what strategies are you going to use with these resources? And so we're now preparing this. Well, we've had positive experience with schools having a more targeted focus on closing learning gaps with ESSER funding and with our new continual improvement plan. We're making adjustments as we move into this next year. We'll have ESSER funding for that purpose for an additional 2 school years beyond this one. And the purpose of that is so that schools with district support can close those gaps, because it'll be a lot harder if we don't close them right now. It'll be much harder down the road if we don't close them.
And Erin, just to follow up, sorry. I want you to know that in October, I attended most of the community councils in my precinct, and I was thrilled to see your work talked about in most of those councils, where they showed that this data per school and talked about how they're going to target their land trust money and what processes they're going to put in place in order to address that data. So I think it's a huge thing that this data is out there. I think it's going to make a huge impact on our kids.
Thank you.
Rich, do you see that happening in all of our schools?
Yeah, so the continual improvement plan, if I were to just focus on that, what really embodies what the priorities of that campus are, right? Put together with the principal, the teacher leader teams, community members, and Dr. Wilson has done a great job in terms of, and that's the feedback that you're hearing, is to capture that. And they identified, based on that, or these data and other data points that they had, what it is they needed to focus on. And so, brought it up again with a group of administrators today, but even in my one-on-one principal visits, that's our go-to document. It's like what is working, what is not. You identified action steps, you identified priorities associated to those action steps, what obstacles are you facing. And honestly, if I'm just being very candid, we know that this has been a very challenging year, and we've heard from teachers and administrators that it's even more so than last year. And what you're seeing here is one of those reasons, right? Because it's, well, I'll just say the educators involved are painfully aware of some of the deficits that our students are experiencing in their learning and how it's been compromised, and they want to do something about it sooner than later, right, to that point. But we're running a marathon here. We are going to, through these plans and through other efforts, whether it be partnership in letters, for an example, that was used earlier and for those earlier grades, being able to provide resource supports to help teachers be successful and families be successful in helping our students. So yes, it's an ongoing, intentional, in answer to your question, effort to say what are our priorities as we're identified in the continual improvement plans. How are we making progress? And Erin's department, again, is doing a great job providing them data points. Many of them have it at their fingertips at the ready to know whether or not what they're doing on their schools right now is having a positive impact on this. If it's not, they're readjusting, right, and adjusting their sales to make that impact. And I mean, just to put it in scope, and again, this is a statewide or holistic view from that state perspective. Those researchers have found that the impacts of COVID on student learning are 2 times greater than what the impacts were of Hurricane Katrina on the students in New Orleans. And we know the hill that it is that we have to climb, but we're buckling down and getting after it. But it's going to take some intentional effort over many months and years to really kind of navigate this. And I would just say, in terms of, we're still experiencing it, right? We still have COVID disruptions. We're still in the middle of this. And I would say, as much as we see the impact here, and as much as we're engaging in prioritizing our efforts this year, it'll still be determined what level of extent or the impact of that extent will be after this year as well. And just other couple data points, just to make you aware of, again, some state-wide data. Students have been infected by quarantines, for an example. Students that were quarantined more than 2 times last year, on average, were 10% lower in their proficiency than students that were not. And that stands to reason, right? We know when we have the students with us, that's where they're going to perform better. And that's where that in-person instruction, for those students that did as many days of in-person instructions as district provided, versus just 100% being online, it's about 11% decrease in proficiency for students that just did online learning. And so for part of that reason, again, we had a lot of students statewide, as well as this district as others, that participated in online learning last year and now are in person for in-person instruction, but their online learning experience, as noted in these data points, they're less proficient than if they were in person. That's a hypothesis, right? But on average, they scored about 10, 11 points less than those that were in-person instruction. So I didn't mean to carry on, but just to set a little bit more of the stage and the context in which we find ourselves. But despite all of that, we have very dedicated educators in the Granite School District that are looking to make that type of difference that our students and their families need.
Chris, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So this is the beginning of the year, and then how is the progress monitored like throughout the year? Is there like an assessment that we do in the mid or near the end so we can see where students are falling before they start the next school year?
Yes, with this formative assessment, the Acadience reading is taken 3 times in the year, beginning, middle, and end. We're actually quite fortunate that this year was the inaugural year of Acadience math, and so we'll have the similar robust data set with mathematics moving forward, and that's something that the elementary school didn't have prior to the state launching it this year.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? You know, we're talking about the effects of COVID and the achievement gap and seeing that. I'm seeing more emails about teacher burnout. What are we doing to address that? Because I'm sure these teachers see this and it causes even more stress and burnout for them. Are we talking a lot about that and helping there?
Yeah, so that is, as part of our ongoing discussion, is understanding what is leading to or those contributing causes of teacher burnout, teacher fatigue. Education was a challenge even before the pandemic, and it's just been exacerbated under our current conditions. That being said, we're trying to find that at times a nuanced balance between what it is that we need to do and how it is that we meet the needs of students and also the wellness of our teachers. So we're looking at several different strategies to do that. We've initiated some of them. A lot of it has to do through the teacher town halls, and we're working on a district-wide adult wellness survey as well to help inform our next steps. But some of it has, or a lot of it has to do with just the staffing shortages, whether that's in the substitutes or the paraprofessionals, and how can we address some of those issues. So it's a multi-layer approach, but we're going to be able to bring forward to the board and to our employees other strategies to help with it, as much of it as is within our ability to address.
That takes money.
Yes.
Are funds available, the ESSER funds available to help our teachers in that regard?
Yeah, it depends on the strategy, whether or not they can be used, but we are exploring budget sources to see what is feasible.
Thanks for your efforts.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. I know
you,
Erin, and if you'll pass along our thanks to Joan as well. I know she probably worked hard on this presentation as well. So
She did. She wasn't able to join us today, but.
that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That is all right. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda, we're going to have our monthly kind of capital project update. Justin, Don, not sure who's taking the lead.
Well, good afternoon. Technical difficulties aside, and even getting our chairs arranged, we're happy to be here and talk about December update.
Can I pull that mic a little closer?
Sure. And,
All right.
and in addition to December, just want to set the stage for January. We're back just for a few days before the January board meeting, and so most of the information that we'll share will be somewhat dated. We'll be getting that information around December 20 and packaging that to you. And so it won't be super current, up to date, a week or two old, but January will have a lot of changes that we've been seeing happening on the site. I believe we start really with security, and so we've had some projects close out. You've been watching these now since about 3 months ago, and I'll let Jaron, geez Louise.
Justin.
I have a nephew, Jaron. I don't know why I just called Justin Jaron. Justin, if you wouldn't mind speaking to those, I'd appreciate it.
My grandmother called me Jared, so thank you. Hardwickson and Rolling Meadows are the two elementaries that we've got finished with the design. We felt it best with the holiday break to wait and bid those in January. And so I've talked with both principals. The plan is to bid those in January, and pending the results of the bids, and it meets our budget, then we'll execute those. Those can be done during the school year, this spring, this late winter and spring, and not interrupt the school too much, or not disrupt the school too much. Yep, thank you. And just a quick overview, if you look at that third column, Oakridge is still under construction, which we'll talk about in a second. Skyline and Cyprus are being built now as we speak. Westlake is under design, currently bidding actually. And then I just mentioned Hardwick's and Rolling Meadows this spring. And then the other three, Oakwood, William Penn, and Woodstock, are just finishing up design and pending budgets. We'd like to do those this summer. Those are a little more disruptive, where we have to move the front office a little bit. And so it'd be best to do those this summer if possible. I've already had 2 conversations with 2 principals about those. And that's the Diamond Ridge model. If you've been out to Diamond Ridge, that's what we would do there. And then pending are the last 4, Valley Crest, Western Hills, West Kearns, and Silver Hills. Our architect will start this January and start design on those, and we'll fit those in as well as the budget will allow. And that will take us complete through all of our elementaries, and a couple of junior highs and a couple of high schools will be included in that, which would be nice. Oakridge, well, there's some photos we'll show you just a second here, but we're moving very quickly. We're moving hopefully to finish this up this month in December. The state elevator at the bottom is inspected or planned to be there on the 21st, and so the goal is to have all of the glass in and the frames up and tile, so that essentially by January 3rd, when the kids come back, we should be all buttoned up. I know we have some notes on there, but some of those notes we've already met those. We've got some glass on site and some frames. You can see the 3 photos. We'd love to see that grass cover with snow, but it's just not quite there, right? So green grass right now in December, end of November. The front there, the middle picture there, that lower blue canopy or low blue fascia there matches, replicates what's going on above with the existing schools. We try to really tie this in, and I think you can kind of see that. And then there's a picture there of the stair tower. As you walk in those doors there, the stair tower and an elevator that will take you up to the main office.
Jared, just let me make sure I get this right. Where,
Justin.
Justin.
That's okay, that's okay.
I'm so sorry, Justin. I totally blame that.
You're fine.
Okay, Justin, this middle picture.
Yes.
That is the elevator?
That, through those doors will be the elevator and the stair tower. The stair tower wraps around it, and the elevator's in the middle. So you
Okay,
can
so the main entrance is that. You
That will
go
be the main
further
entrance.
up.
Yep, it'll take you up, and then you'll empty it.
So this is the main public entrance to the school in the future to accommodate security.
Yeah.
You're used to the entry, which is now behind that.
Yeah.
So the old entry is behind it. The kids can still enter there before the bell rings, but after the bell rings, this is the main school entrance.
And there used to be some stairs that went right up right there with a canopy over those stairs.
Yes.
Those have been torn out, and that's in its place is this building addition, if you will.
Okay, so you'll enter here, there will
Yep.
be an elevator and some stairs,
Yep.
and you go up the stairs, and there's the office.
Into a secure vestibule and into the office, and then you
Gotcha.
go from there.
Okay, thanks.
Just curious, the elevator, is it like just free for anybody to, like, or do they have to buzz a thing and it's so anybody can just walk in and use it?
Yes, and you can put a timer on there, or you could do something if you were worried about kids playing with it. But during the business hours, we want it to be open, so anybody, any patron or any kid or anybody that had those needs or a wheelchair, walk, or whatever, could access the elevator.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
it does.
Okay.
I can just picture kids like having a heyday with this, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wise counsel, and the likelihood of having it shut off for key use only before the bell is high, but after the bell rings, where you're not seeing a lot of kids coming in and out of the school, we'll probably switch that to just an all-access elevator, because it really isn't appropriate to have someone that needs the elevator have to call that main office to get it done. But wise counsel to take the timer and set it so before the bell rings, kids aren't enjoying the ride.
Right. We had something similar at the Churchill, if you recall, if you've been to Churchill and the new elevator there, and we had some similar struggles there trying to figure out the right balance. And so I think there's some kind of figuring that out a little bit.
As Justin mentioned, Westlake Junior is now, we've had a chance to go meet with the school community council again, and we'll show you some interactions with them, looking at color renditions, selecting some of those throughout the whole of the community. And then the bidding process, it's out on the street formally. We've held a pre-bid, and we expect those back in January. So there were a series of color renditions, material change renditions that were generated by the architect, and then put out a modified version of those to the community as a whole to solicit some of their feedback. The mountain red came back at 51% of the votes. A gray, it's called platinum, came back at 31%. And a buff, which was pretty darn close to the original school, came back at 17%. And so the district is moving forward with the mountain red.
So on that, I was able to attend the community council. Terry was out of town. Westlake falls in his precinct. But I was able to visit that community council where the designers were there. And they were presenting interior colors and exterior colors. And initially, they only had one exterior color. So I asked for a survey to be done, and I'm not sure that they were thrilled, to say the least, but I thought it was, and I know our board thinks that it's very important to engage community on this and get some of their feedback, because these buildings are going to stand for decades, and it's in their community. And so I appreciate, Dawn, you working with the architects, and Ben, you getting involved in creating this survey. I want people to understand the survey was out for all of 48 hours and we had over 1,000 responses, which for that time frame is huge. Tyler Howe had the students in school take the survey to get their opinions, and then community-wide, I just think it was shared a few places on Facebook, and people, it was super easy. It was an easy survey to look at, to take. There were also a lot of comments gathered, and so, because honestly, I wasn't sure with the red, if the red was the only option, because, it looks a lot like Granger, which is just Kinney Corner. So, but once again, I'm okay with this, knowing that the feedback was gathered. So thanks for your team for kind of indulging my request of that survey. I thought it was important.
There was also a couple of slides, I don't know if you noticed in the comments section, a couple of students suggested neon pink and purple. So I'm glad we didn't maybe go that
Yes. If you add up the percentages, that's why it doesn't total 100.
Moving on to Skyline, just some update on kind of what's going on there. The pool building, this is the athletic building, the gymnasium, the wrestling room, the dance room, the pool, volleyball. That is the building under construction currently, and they're kind of working, if you will, east to west, west being where the pool is, and that's kind of the last space that's kind of being, they just finished the excavation of the dirt to get down where they need to get. They'll start to form up the concrete around the sides, and they can drop the pool liner inside of there. So that's kind of what's happening in the pool area, which is exciting. I'll show you some slides in just a second. Kitchen and cafeteria, old building has been demolished. Working on some utilities with the Mountain Olympus sewer and the electrical work on the pedestrian walkway, which we'll show in a second. Tilt panel casting slab, they have to lay a flat panel down, concrete down to put the tilt panels on, pour those, and then they can stand them up. And then some earthwork around the building, which we'll show. Here's the one on the left is that inside our building, you can see they're digging down to get to the elevation they need to get for that for the pool, which is exciting. The next set of slides will show you next month. I'm sure we'll see some concrete in there, and you'll see it vastly different. To the right, just some demolition that's happened now, which is clearing some things up there. This is unfortunately not the best slide because of the shadow, but this is along that north drive. You can barely see it, and I promise you next month we'll have some better slides of that wall. It looks very sharp, and I even we've heard some positive feedback from the neighbors along that north drive, how much they appreciate the gesture, if you will, the nice wall. It's not just a slab of concrete or whatever. It's very nice.
This is where there's that trail. This is the trail behind Skyline.
So this is the roadway for the neighbors to the north, but we have retaining wall all along that north, which includes the trail.
This is off Virginia.
Yeah, we just have not gotten to the trail that crosses Mill Creek yet with the walls.
Oh, gotcha.
It's building from the east, migrating to the west. We're not to where you're thinking yet.
Okay.
If you turned off Virginia and went west, you'd see this wall right there.
Okay. Yeah, that's really nice.
It is very nice.
I bet they are happy.
And the next slide, next month will be even better, I promise you. More demolition. This is where the art building was, formerly known as the art building, is now no longer. And here we're just continuing. This is the pool lobby, just putting the storefront system there and starting to kind of close the building in, which is exciting. You see some tile work going on in some places. I mean, in some places it's finished work like tile and painting and, wrapping things up really close. In other places, like the pool, we're still, finishing up the concrete work there. So it is fun to see the progress as the building progresses.
And when does that open again?
The entire
March?
building will be, no, the entire building will be open this summer, end of June. And then we can turn it over and we've even talked about having some sort of a, grand ribbon cutting, whatever we want to do, but this summer.
I saw also that the kitchen and cafeteria were demolished.
Yes.
So where are they?
Well, those are in the landfill, but the new, the current location are the relocatable portable front up in front of the building on the south side off of Upland is the cafeteria, and kitchen is up front there.
They've been using that since June.
They have been using that, since the summer, since.
I just didn't know.
Yeah.
To your point, the kids are all at McDonald's.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or home or whatever, yeah.
Swig and thirst.
Right. And then as we have mentioned in the previous months, some of the tracking of the change orders.
We don't have any changes.
No, we don't until we get there, yeah. So we have, you've seen them already, we have a couple of change orders. I think there's 4 this month. Change order 34 and 35 are dealing with the temporary utilities and infrastructure to keep all of those temporary buildings up and running and getting those up and running. It's quite an undertaking.
And if you recall from our presentation a couple of months ago, we said that even though we've set the final price, those bills would roll in to meet that final price over the last several months. And so we're still processing those bills to make that a reality. And I would expect 1, maybe 2 more But again, the upper limit you've set has already taken this into account. We're just seeing the bills themselves coming through.
Next slide. And then you see on change order number 3, this is for, excuse me, my voice, some existing conditions that I mentioned, I think a month ago. We had a unforeseen sewer line that we didn't know about. It was not on any survey or any existing easement, as well as some a power line. And so those are some costs associated with those, relocating those, working with the utility companies.
And if you recall, not only did they not have an easement, they were surprised to find out the line was there. So when this was an unforeseen circumstance, I've never seen one quite this unforeseen before in a suburban development.
The biggest one you may have seen, or you will see, is the change order dealing with that $2 million one. That's just transferring, as we wrote in the description, that's just moving funds internally. It's not an additional cost that you haven't seen. It's just moving funds from one PO to another PO. That's all we were doing, is moving it to the right PO so it's accounted for. But it was already in that number that you all approved a month or so ago. So those are the 4 change orders this month for Skyline.
Cyprus, to the untrained eye, on November 1, there didn't look like there was a heck of a lot happening, but there certainly has been, and we have some great imagery that starts to illustrate that in a couple of slides. But the project timeline really is dealing with all of that underground MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing that's out there, and continuing to do site preparation. And one of the big things that will be happening for the next year in entirety is drilling of the geothermal wells. And so we'll be sinking ground source heat pump material over an entire year to make it an energy efficient building, as well as, frankly, lower our operations and maintenance costs. So here's a great picture showing what you observed on November 1 as just a bunch of pipes sticking out of the athletic section. Footing and foundation is now going down. On the major pours, they're doing about 150 cubic yards of concrete per pour. So that equates to, 15 to 18 cement trucks a day when we pour a footing. So they're making some very, very good progress there. Again, just some details of the footing and foundation work happening. This is the one that I think really sets the stage. Now you're starting to see the excavation and compaction of the majority of the footprint of the school. And so you're starting to see not just the athletics function, but you're starting to see where the rest of the school walls are going. And so they'll continue this process for the next several months. Weather permitting, on really good days, we'll get concrete down. But as Justin said, I think for the good of our state, we'll sacrifice having some snow on the ground for tough construction conditions. Again, just a slightly more detailed look at the amount of footings. The squares are where we're putting very large columns, and so that's something mid-building that holds a lot of pressure. And so those are very important squares to us. The look-ahead schedule really, kind of hard to read, but it's showing primarily that underground work is occurring. So we have not seen any schedule slip for material orders yet, so nothing of substance. Did some of the pipe for the geothermal wells take a week or two longer? Yes, but that's something that we can make up for in the year worth of drilling. So we haven't seen the big shipment issues hit us quite yet, and so we're cautiously optimistic on their look-ahead schedule for the next couple of months. Again, we're not seeing change orders to this point. We will preface that to this point being the key operator, we do expect to see a couple of structural changes come in as peer review has fleshed out some shortcomings in the tonnage of steel. We're going to need to make sure that we stiffen some things up, but we're also looking to see some deductive change orders on some of our footing and foundation work. And so we're seeing early up and downs that really are minor and would be within, as we mentioned, that percent and a half worth of change orders on a project. So we're not seeing anything of grave concern at this stage. and the team's been doing well at balancing what we'll call sometimes some no-cost change orders, where we'll find a way to work around something at no fee. So a lot of that's happening in the background as well.
Don, can you just expound a little more on what those wells are for, what they're about, what they're doing for us?
So we've designed a heating and cooling system that uses the earth to either bring in heat or reject heat. So our systems like to use a 60-degree earth temperature rather than in the summer, your home air conditioners, for example, are trying to push out heat in 90 to 100-degree air. And that exchange rate uses a lot of energy to happen. We're going to reject our heat into 60-degree earth, and it takes it a lot faster. The converse happens in the winter, that we'll preheat these, the water, if you will. It's a glycol solution in the ground source heat to 60 degrees. And so we're not heating air from the outside air temperature of 30, we're heating it from 60 up to what we're going to need to heat the building. And so using this as a long-term, energy efficient way to get our heat in and out of the building. And so this is, we have ground source heat pump in Armstrong, Olean Walker, and South Kearns, for example.
And Hart-Vixen.
And Hart-Vixen, thank you, and the new Hart-Vixen. We really like this. It's a great efficient way to make things happen. Not all school facilities can use it because maybe the geology is incorrect, et cetera. But this is the best long-term methodology to keep your buildings at good solid temperatures and a lot less wear and tear on the mechanical equipment as well.
So will we use this method at Westlake? And I know that the geology at Skyline is not conducive to this, is that right?
The Westlake building will implement a more traditional system.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not quite as conducive as we would need it to be.
It's also finding space for a well field, and that's always sometimes tricky too, is to find that location or.
Yeah, good point. Okay. So that takes us through our December update, and so far weather has been good this month, and we'll have a lot of great progress that's occurred. Again, these photos are roughly 10 days old by the time we sit here because we package your presentation early, and we've seen a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks. So next month will be very exciting.
It's just exciting to see this every month. We sure appreciate you guys. I know a lot of other people appreciate it too. It's easy to just kind of take this and post it so that, all families, regardless where you live, all families can click on it and see the exact same thing we're seeing. And especially for that Cyprus community, to see those footings, that is very, very exciting and very real.
It's very exciting, and I do have to say, for the homes that are being built around it, boy, they are fast. I saw a lot go from dirt to a framed house in 21 days. And I thought, boy, I wish we could build a school that way, but it's just not going to happen.
Schools are a little bit more complex, and the size. Yeah. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to head into a break for dinner, and we will re-adjourn at 7 p.m.